Meghan Markle is the most inappropriate member of the royal family that I have ever come across. "You know how to curtsy, right?" he asked as we were driving up, and I assumed it was a joke. When Sophie said those things in a recent interview, the royal family fell apart. However, she didn't end there. She uncovered secrets that Meghan had been frantically trying to hide for years. "I've had enough of Meghan." In actuality, she was dismissed for openly flirting with William, the future monarch. The true motivation behind Meghan's pursuit of entry into the royal family. William recoiled in revulsion at Meghan's extremely uncomfortable flirtation. And the real reason Meghan left the royal family. A reality so repulsive that it contradicts everything the public has been told. Everything you believed to be true was false. Sophie simply blasted the whole thing apart. The lady with the incorrect crown. An interview clip went viral on the internet on April 1st, 2026. It was then swiftly removed, but not before thousands of people had seen it. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, had openly accused Meghan Markle of inappropriate behavior in the video. It was desperately needed to be a joke. It must have been a joke. It was April Fool's Day, after all. Someone was undoubtedly pulling a terrible practical joke on the country. However, by midday, an increasing number of people were swearing on everything they owned that they had personally witnessed the film and that every moment of it was horrifyingly true. Anything else? Soon after, there were speculations circulating on social media that a top palace official had issued a public statement clarifying that Sophie's opinions were in line with the norms necessary to preserve the institution's integrity and the long-standing expectations of behavior within the royal family. Every statement she spoke was directly supported by the palace. In this battle, Sophie wasn't fighting alone. The entire royal family was on her side. She was the one person no one could legitimately write off as resentful or personally dangerous. Therefore, the family had picked her on purpose. Millions of people believed they understood the Sussex tale, but what Sophie said next utterly destroyed it. According to Meghan's Sophie, she never really desired the Sussex title. Sussex served as a consolation prize. The title of Princess of Wales and the man who held it were what Meghan had really been aiming for from the start. Sophie revealed to the interviewer that she had initially told her husband Edward that something didn't feel quite right. Meghan wasn't attempting to fit in with the family. Within it, she was setting herself up for a particular objective. She was not paying attention to the part she had been assigned. Her gaze was fixed on the throne next to her. Long before anyone in the general public had recognized them, the warning signals had been yelling. Meghan was still only Harry's girlfriend in 2017. There had been no announcement of an engagement. No public announcement regarding the relationship had been released by the palace. However, Meghan entered a lengthy interview with Vanity Fair, one of the world's most influential magazines, and confirmed the romance completely on her own terms without telling the palace or Harry's media team. The institution's employees were incensed. In private, they referred to it as her first unilateral action, a clear indication that she was going to break every rule before she had even legally committed to abiding by any of them. Then, in the weeks leading up to the May 2018 wedding, the tiara fight broke out. Furthermore, the story that most people are familiar with is very different from the actual one. Meghan had her eye on a particular tiara from the royal collection. Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser, turned down the request. According to reports, Harry lost his temper with royal employees over the choice. Nearly no one stated the reason behind the rejection. Meghan had selected a tiara with a past. It was one of several items in the royal collection that had been part of the Russian imperial family before their destruction during the 1917 revolution. The jewelry was dispersed over Europe when that world fell apart. A few items were purchased neatly. Others went through individuals who had left Russia with belongings that weren't fully theirs. The palace imposed stringent regulations about those specific pieces because of that unclear past. A spotless security file was required for anyone wearing them. There are no ambiguities or unanswered questions. Meghan's security clearance was incomplete, which was the issue. Unresolved issues about some of the connections and relationships she had made while working in Hollywood had been brought to her attention by her background check. Until tiara was removed from the table, the links had not been thoroughly examined or cleared. Harry was yelling at employees about a piece of jewelry, but the real reason it was being delayed was because it was in an unsolved security file that contained the name of his future wife. He was either unaware of that or indifferent to it. That occasion was never forgotten by the household workers. For many of them, it was the first time they realized what was about to happen. However, the events leading up to the wedding were just the start. After Meghan was formally welcomed into the family, things were much more calculated and unsettling than they had been previously. What the cameras nearly failed to capture. Something inside Sophie changed when she got to this section of the program. Her voice, which had been warm during the first parts of the interview, cooled into something more forceful and perilous. Meghan's suspicious behavior toward William was not an isolated incident, she remarked, leaning slightly forward. It wasn't a cultural miscommunication between a formal British institution and an American woman. She claimed there was a pattern, and it began in May 2018, just 72 hours after Meghan wed Harry and became a member of the royal family. Visitors everywhere. After giving William a lengthy, forceful kiss on the cheek, Meghan grabbed his forearm in a position that no one in the room could describe as normal. William's whole body tensed up. Senior employees who were standing close by looked at each other. After that, the word alarm was used internally. The most basic physical boundaries surrounding the future king had already been violated by a duchess who had only been in the family for 3 days. 5 months later, in October 2018, Meghan put her hand flat against William's back while they spoke at a mental health event at Buckingham Palace. It wasn't an accident or a brush. It was a purposeful flat-palmed touch on his back. The type of physical gesture a person makes at a formal royal gathering with their parents or spouse, rather than their husband's brother. In an instant, William pulled his body away. It was a clear and unspoken rejection of a boundary that ought never to have been crossed. At the time, Sophie noticed it and recalled how William's body had recoiled as though he had been scorched. The Royal Foundation Forum, a public gathering in January 2019, brought the four of them together to talk about their charity endeavors. While the general population perceived togetherness, Sophie saw something quite different. The panel's prearranged sitting arrangement, which put William next to Catherine and Harry next to Meghan, a typical royal arrangement, had been rejected by Meghan. Instead, she tried to take a seat right next to William. She frequently interrupted Catherine's speeches at the ceremony to direct media attention to herself. Meghan acted without hesitation or regret because she believed that her famous status entitled her to the same status as the future King and Queen of England. Something that had occurred even earlier in July of 2018 at Wimbledon was entirely overlooked by the media. Meghan went to the tournament, gave the order for security to physically prevent photographers from taking pictures of her in public, and her demands for privacy made headlines for days. Everyone covered that story. What transpired inside the private box where Meghan was seated, a box that put her in close proximity to William's circle members, was not reported. People who were there that day claim that Meghan focused all of her energy and attention on William across the seating arrangement for a considerable portion of the afternoon, constantly attempting to get him to make direct eye contact and engage in conversation while Catherine sat at a different location within the same group. It was so noticeable that it caused discomfort in the room, according to one witness, and those who saw it carried it with them for years. The bullying accusations against Meghan made headlines throughout the world by March 2021, when the palace began a formal internal HR probe. However, Sophie disclosed that the study covered much more ground than worker concerns about bullying. It had a record of boundary infractions over several years. Records showed that late-night messages were sent straight to top royals, avoiding all official channels of communication. Several observers regarded Meghan's forced physical contact with the Queen and Prince Charles during formal events as manufactured and performative rather than truly kind. And this was the most damaging discovery in the whole file. Meghan had been giving American media connections direct access to private family chats, exploiting the personal details of Windsor family life to establish her public persona as the compassionate, approachable American in contrast to the stiff and aloof British royals. Sophie's account of Meghan's true goal was terrible, even if the people she was describing were seated in rooms a hallway away. She wasn't attempting to fit in. She was attempting to establish herself as the most influential person present. Meghan desired to be the main attraction. She was also going to make the Queen's life intolerable if she couldn't be the Queen. Then, in late 2018, Catherine took a step that completely upended the narrative that the world had been fed about her. She didn't sob in private in a royal hallway or call a friend to confide. Catherine took up a pen and went straight to a top household official via a private channel to register a formal, written complaint against Meghan. Lawyers acting on her behalf did not handle this, nor was it a worker grievance handled by an HR system. This was personal because Catherine put her own name on file and made it clear that her sister-in-law's behavior toward her husband had become intolerable without proof. It never made it to any journalists, and it never leaked. With the kind of hush that only wealth and power can maintain forever, the palace buried it. However, it did not vanish. At that point, the narrative becomes brutal. That complaint was resurrected and put at the heart of the process when the 2021 evaluation tore through the home 3 years later. Sources with first-hand knowledge of the review attested to the fact that it was there, numbered and cited, with nowhere to hide. Nothing that the palace had not previously documented was disclosed by Sophie. Years before the public was permitted to hear it, Catherine had already expressed it in writing. William never showed Meghan any consideration. Every move she made was met with utter and unwavering resistance from his reserve. Every gesture was met with a retreat. No amount of tenacity could overcome the professional distance that greeted each advance. And the tactic continued even when it became abundantly evident that William would never move. It went on a different path. What followed was far more devastating, more deliberate, and colder than everything that had come before. Because William was not the target at all this time. Meghan could lock the door with ease on the only member of the royal family. How they took Harry. At this point, Sophie's voice trailed off, but not in a good way. She stopped talking in the same manner that someone stops speaking when they are about to say something that truly hurts them. Meghan knew everything, according to Sophie. She was aware of Harry's mother's awful destiny. Meghan was aware of the anguish he had carried around for more than 20 years. She was aware of the consequences of Harry's lifelong status as the spare son in a household where your entire existence is determined by your birth order. Sophie claimed that Meghan was aware of every wound and made no effort to treat any of them. Rather, Meghan applied pressure to every wound she discovered, using the resulting anguish to hold Harry just where she needed him. One of the most unsettling parts of the entire 5-hour interview was hearing that said clearly, loudly, and directly on a live national broadcast. The fight against William has reached a permanent standstill by 2019. Meghan then focused entirely on Harry and started destroying all of his remaining relationships. This did not occur in a single, dramatic altercation. It took months of cautious, methodical movements, each of which appeared to be harmless on its own. The responses were consistently the same when the Williams office contacted the brothers to set up time. They were busy, according to Meghan. Meghan thought they needed some room. Harry's direct line to his brother was cut off, message by message, request by request. After walking together behind their mother's coffin as teenagers and supporting one another through everything the family had thrown at them, two brothers eventually stopped talking to each other. It was exactly what Sophie described as a psychological blockage. In order to convince Harry that everyone who had loved him prior to her arrival was secretly opposed to him, Meghan positioned herself as the only person on the planet who genuinely knew him. In order for him to have no choice but to turn toward her, she needed him to be totally alone. The extent of that control was made public when Archie was christened in July 2019. Meghan declined to identify the godparents and rejected the suggested photographers. As if it weren't sufficient enough. She treated her son's position in the line of succession as a private family affair that the institution had no right to record, refusing to provide the constitutional transparency that royal births had demanded for generations. There was no doubt in Sophie's reading of that moment. It had nothing to do with privacy. It was a proclamation that the Crown's regulations would stop at Meghan's home door and would only extend as far as she allowed. During this time, Meghan was directly informing staff members behind closed doors that her status as a duchess implied equality with Catherine rather than subordination. She insisted on having the same global platform, the same budget, and the same security team. Meghan did not accept the rationale offered by palace authorities when they rejected such demands, citing centuries-old constitutional laws that had regulated the family. She compiled all of the rejections and denials into a story about persecution. Due to her race, she was receiving distinct treatment. She was being purposefully degraded. Brick by brick, the victim architecture was being built with the express purpose of surviving a worldwide audience. In 2020, Sophie reached out to Meghan and provided her personal advice. It was a sincere act of kindness from a woman who had experienced the same traumatic shift from everyday civilian life to royal duty. Sophie was familiar with the sensation. She had experienced it firsthand. She then volunteered to impart all of her knowledge. Meghan gave a 3-word reply. She answered, "I have Harry, and that was all I needed." Those 3 words did not sound like a courteous dismissal to Sophie. They sounded to her like a statement of complete control. Meghan had little interest in finding out how the organization operated. With no outside voice that could possibly reach Harry, she was totally preoccupied with keeping a monopoly on his allegiance. Nobody outside the inner circle of the palace was aware of how dire things had already gotten. Furthermore, the conversations that took place behind closed legal doors were more sinister than those that were visible to the public. A lawsuit was the first step. Meghan has sued the Mail on Sunday at the beginning of 2020. A handwritten letter she wrote to her estranged father, Thomas Markle, was published in the newspaper. Meghan claimed that the letter's publication violated her right to privacy. At first glance, the case appeared to be very simple. A woman defending her private correspondence against a newspaper that had gone too far. However, something hazardous was developing beneath that spotless exterior. There is a discovery process in every litigation. At that point, both parties are legally obligated to turn over records, correspondence, and documents. In this instance, the discovery process had the potential to reveal something disastrous for Meghan. It threatened to bring all of her private correspondence with British journalists and media contacts into public court. Meghan had been openly constructing the narrative of a helpless lady being pursued by a vicious and unrelenting media. The communications that could come to light revealed a completely different narrative. Understanding the risk, Meghan's own attorneys discreetly suggested that she store a significant amount of that private media correspondence. The exposure danger was also apparent to the palace's legal team. But none of this had been disclosed to Harry. He had only been given a basic account of what had happened, according to individuals who were directly involved in those discussions. He had been informed that their privacy was at issue in the lawsuit. No one informed Harry that it also involved safeguarding a paper trail that could have ruined the meticulously crafted narrative for Oprah Winfrey's cameras. Now examine the letter itself, as it was more than just what it looked like. According to reports, palace communications workers had seen a copy before Meghan submitted it to her father. Serious concerns were expressed by at least one senior assistant. It was a specific and unsettling issue. There were portions in that letter that seemed to have been written simultaneously for 2 audiences. Thomas was badly hurt on a personal level by the harsh and unvarnished language. However, if it ever came to light, it was also deliberate and meticulous enough to read as the words of a devastated daughter who had been wronged. In other words, it was a letter that served as a shield in public and as a sword in private. On Sunday, Thomas mailed the letter. In the end, the court decided in Meghan's favor, but it also revealed something that could not be disregarded. 5 of Meghan's closest friends were providing coordinated anonymous remarks about the same topic to People magazine at the very moment she was writing to her father about how excruciating it was to be misled by the media. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a coincidence. It was well planned. At the same time, a concerted media campaign to elicit public sympathy and a private letter to a father expressing unadulterated pain were passing through the same hands. When Sophie finally spoke in public, she made no mention of the letter. She didn't have to. She only stated that Meghan had misrepresented a private family dispute as a violation of human rights. The rebranding started with that letter. It became worldwide after the Oprah interview. Sophie was honest about the nature of the Oprah interview. It wasn't a terrified woman who at last had the guts to speak. It was a purposeful commercial debut. And the Windsor family's harm served as the foundation for the brand that was being introduced. The timing was what made it worse. Sophie attested to having spoken with Meghan directly several times before the broadcast of that interview. She had suggested a path. Despite the fact that she had opened a door, all of her attempts were met with indifference. The interview was then aired. When it did, Prince Philip was receiving heart care while lying in a hospital bed. He was 99. The palace did not see what they were witnessing as a family member's frantic plea for assistance. They perceived it as a deliberate attack that was timed to occur when the organization was most vulnerable and exposed. Furthermore, timing had already been employed as a weapon. One of William's main efforts, Earthshot, included the Sussex Netflix teaser. Catherine's Christmas Carol recital was supposed to coincide with their holiday special. Every significant piece of Sussex content had been created with a particular royal moment in mind. The pattern remained the same. The harm was never unintentional. Harry had lost something vital by the time everyone saw him sitting on that Californian lawn. During the interview, the man sitting next to Meghan had been cut off from his family. All of the relationships and friendships he had had prior to Meghan's arrival had been severed. He was given a story to perform that he had not written, and he was unable to get out of it. He believed what he said, which was the most unsettling aspect. It was straightforward, but neither Harry nor Meghan seemed to get it. The institution they had been attempting to dismantle for years had endured far worse than anything they could do to stop it. It remained upright. They weren't. And they were only now starting to feel the full effects of what they had done. The threat made prior to the summit, the children, and the crown. Sophie inhaled deeply before revealing this next startling fact. According to her, the crown never required a DNA test. She paused to allow her words to fully register. According to Sophie, the solution to the question of why the children's titles were not declared and made public right away is one word: discretion. She added that prudence in that family entails being certain of both intention and biology. The broadcast studio became motionless. Before Sophie could finish her sentence, the video went viral on social media across the globe. The word fraud had not been used by her. No one had been directly accused of lying by her. She didn't have to. It was a grenade when the word discretion was inserted into that particular sentence with that particular pause before and after it. And in front of millions of people, she had just pulled the pin. You must comprehend the true meaning of constitutional transparency within the royal family in order to comprehend why those statements caused such a stir. Births associated with the royal line of succession have necessitated the institution's formal documentation and public verification of the ancestry of potential heirs for centuries. It's not a formality. It has centuries of legal precedent and is a constitutional function. Meghan did not merely make a lifestyle decision regarding privacy when she declined that transparency for both Archie and Liette. She refused to let the organization carry out a task that it had consistently completed for many generations. Where there should have been documentation, Meghan left a gap. Furthermore, neither a biased public nor hostile journalists created the distrust that filled that hole. The individual who was a legitimate member of the family made it. You cannot use the system as a weapon and then demand access to its benefits. Archie's and Lilith's titles were contingent upon a transparent relationship with the sovereign. The titles had not come naturally because Meghan had destroyed that connection. The worst part of this whole scenario is what transpired at the Sandringham Summit in January 2020, which was never made public. It was a crisis meeting at the summit. The terms of Sussex's departure from royal duties were negotiated by Queen Elizabeth, Prince Charles, Prince William, and Prince Harry. For the family, it was already a tragic event. However, Harry took his father aside for a private conversation before the official meeting had started. According to sources cited in royal biography research and supported by independent palace accounts, Harry informed Charles in that private conversation that Meghan had threatened to give an interview to a major American outlet that would be far worse than anything the family had yet encountered if her demands were not fulfilled, which included the retention of their royal titles, an independent financial operation outside the palace, and ongoing publicly funded security. On behalf of his wife, who wasn't even there in the building, Harry gave that warning to his own father. After that, Charles apparently fell silent for a considerable amount of time. He then turned to face his son and posed a single query. He questioned Meghan's comprehension of her threat. Harry was at a loss for words. Before the formal discussion started, the Queen was informed about that exchange. According to those with first-hand knowledge of what transpired that day, Elizabeth's perception of Meghan changed from being extremely complex to being totally and irreversibly irreversible during a private chat. Public perception of the Sandringham Summit is that it was a difficult family negotiation. However, The institution realized inside those gates that it was not dealing with a challenging daughter-in-law at that very moment. One was holding it at gunpoint. Then the summer of 2022 arrived, and the Sussex operations actions during that time left palace employees genuinely furious. The age of Queen Elizabeth was 96. Her public appearances had all but ceased, and her health had been deteriorating for months. The nation was ready to bid farewell to the woman who had shaped the institution for 7 decades, as they silently and sorrowfully realized that a 70-year reign was coming to an end. In the meantime, Meghan and Harry's legal team was occupied with submitting trademark applications for a company named Royal Globe in the US. A wide range of commercial categories were covered by the filings, including media production, podcasting, lifestyle content, and instructional materials. Such large-scale trademark applications necessitate months of strategic planning and legal preparation. Thus, the Sussex team was preparing to sell the royal identity that Meghan had spent 2 years publicly deconstructing while Elizabeth was dying. According to many inside Buckingham Palace, the internal response was one of the most deeply disrespectful things the Sussex team had ever done. On September 8, 2022, the Queen passed away. Weeks before her body was cold, the trademark applications had been filed. While its matriarch was still alive, the commercialization of the monarchy's sorrow had been planned and lawfully carried out. By the end of 2024, Charles had issued his clear private directive. There would be no carefully planned public reunion, no second Sandringham meeting, and no olive branch offered in any direction. Without a moment's hesitation, Sophie delivered the conclusion. She explained that the door was not just locked. It was covered by construction. In light of this, Harry's protracted court battle for publicly financed armed guards appeared even more remarkable. By early 2024, he was pursuing legal procedures to obtain private payment access to British police protection while concurrently living permanently in California, performing no public duty, and carrying no royal duties. Sophie was harsh about the implications of such demand. It was risky, she added, since it established a precedent that anyone with a royal title can purchase British state protection, regardless of whether they assist the British people in any way. She made a clear parallel to Prince Andrew, which was meant to be devastating. When Andrew's public position was taken away, he was no longer protected. The king had made it apparent that there would be no compromises or exceptions. Sophie responded, Harry wanted the shield, but she never picked up the sword. How mistaken was he, though? Because without him and Meghan, the royal family is doing just fine. In fact, their absence is more of a blessing than a problem. The crown lasts. The institution, Catherine, and what remained. Just as Sophie was finishing her sentence, one image appeared on the screen behind her. At Sandringham, Catherine, Princess of Wales, is positioned next to King Charles. She wasn't doing anything. She was just there, at ease, and totally at ease in the part she had created and the location she had selected. Sophie had just spent 5 hours outlining the distinction between a woman who saw the monarchy as her life's goal and a woman who saw it as a means of building her own brand. The picture didn't require a caption. It wasn't personal flattery when Sophie elevated Catherine during the broadcast. The contrast between two women who had entered the same milieu and made entirely different decisions about what to do inside it made an argument about institutional survival tangible. The crown is a marathon, and every year of unglamorous, unbroadcast service is a deposit into something that pays out over generations, not quarterly profit reports. As Catherine Sophie said she realized from the first day. Catherine spent years acquainting herself with the institution's needs and speed, whereas Meghan came wanting to establish the parameters of her own relationship. Sophie cited a particular instance from late 2025 that encapsulated the whole scenario. Catherine made her announcement at the Christmas concert, a nationwide gathering centered on quiet service and fellowship. Meghan's Californian crew rescheduled their Netflix Christmas special to air within the same time slot. Sophie recognized it right away as the same playbook that had been used consistently for years. Philip was admitted to the hospital during the Oprah interview. During Earthshot, the trailer for the Netflix documentary was released. The Christmas Carol service was arranged in opposition to the holiday content. The tactic had never been subtle or altered. Catherine's performance received an 8. 4 million people watched. In the UK, Meghan's special failed to place in the top 10. Without being asked, the audience had formed their opinion and presented it. By late 2025, the data in every quantifiable category brutally efficiently revealed the whole story. In the UK, 73% of people liked Catherine. William's had a score of 69%. Meghan's had fallen to 17%. Spotify had completely severed ties with the Sussexes. Netflix had drastically reduced its financial commitment. Donations to the Archewell Foundation had decreased by 40%. Because the entire premise of the Royal Glow lifestyle operation Meghan had tried to build following the Oprah interview was based on a contradiction that the public quickly saw through, it failed to find a sustainable audience. It is impossible to publicly demolish an organization, accuse it of being fundamentally racist and cruel, and then try to capture and market the reputation and warmth that the institution fosters. Even though Meghan didn't seem to understand the contradiction, the crowd did. Sophie said it plainly: you cannot leave a family, call it toxic, and then try to sell the Royal Glow as merchandise. The world is not that easily fooled. The palace's choice to remain silent through Spare, through the Netflix series, through every public attack the Sussex operation had launched over 5 years, had been a deliberate and calculated strategy grounded in a deep understanding of how performative conflict actually sustains itself. To engage with someone whose entire public identity depends on having a powerful adversary is to give them the oxygen they need to keep burning. Charles and William had chosen instead to let the work respond. State visits, community engagements, the Together at Christmas concert, The Patient, consistent accumulation of genuine public service that no production company can manufacture because it requires years of real commitment to produce. Sophie said they did not sue and they did not denounce. They simply closed the door and kept walking. She said the Sussexes were now exiles with style guides. They had titles. They had no role, no institutional budget, and most critically, no influence over anything that actually mattered within the life of the crown. Sophie's final argument was the one that reframed the entire era. The Sussex disruption had not fractured.